Good afternoon, everyone. You are in for a treat today. I'm going to do a little introduction to this gentleman right here. This is Steve Height. He started at Garden Spot Village in March of 2020 as the greenhouse manager. Prior to that, he worked for a large lawn care and landscaping company for 20 years before being hired for the greenhouse manager position. His wife and him have been married for 35 years with 3 girls, 2 son-in-laws, and 1 grandson. His hobbies are gardening, camping, and Christmas lights. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Steve Height.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? Very good. Usually I don't have a microphone in front of me while I'm doing this on a presentation. In fact, this is actually the first time I'm doing something like this in this scale. Usually my comfort zone, and you'll see pretty soon, is my greenhouse where, it's kind of like, okay, I'm here. I know what I'm doing. I can talk loud enough. I can hear loud enough. So if you can't hear me, just give me a little nod and I'll make sure I bring the mic up to my mouth like this. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for your invitation to this beautiful campus here at Frederick Living. This is not actually my first time here. I was here roughly right after COVID when you folks had that little water issue over here, and we had to move everybody upstairs. So that was my first experience here at Frederick Living, and then last year, you heard about one of my hobbies being Christmas lights. Well, they asked me last year, because of my expertise in Christmas lights, to sort of decorate your patio area where it was with the fall with the lights and stuff like that. So I came here and did that for you as well. So Frederick Living has been a familiar place for me, and of course it was great to get the invitation to be here and speak to you folks about our aeroponic greenhouse. So I gave you guys all a brochure. And if it just kind of goes over some of the highlights. And of course, if you would like to come and see our greenhouse after this presentation, make sure you tug on Emily's ear there, and I'm sure she'll put something together for us next year, okay? All right, well, let's get started here. And if you have any questions or anything like that, just raise your hand during the presentation. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's midstream here. I usually kind of like, when I'm doing the greenhouse, kind of like doing it on the fly. I do have some things that I want to cover, but it's been really cool over the last 5 years now, working at this aeroponics greenhouse, learning about it, and just enjoying being given tours to folks like yourselves and people that are interested in gardening themselves. While I do ask you that, let me ask you this quick. How many of you own a garden or have a garden or had a garden at some point in your lives? That's fantastic. And certainly, I bet you all still do it if you could. I know I have one myself, and it's kind of, in certain years, it's getting very dry out there right now, of course. And so one of the things that really interested me, of course, is the fact that growing vegetables and lettuce without dirt. And I'm like, wow, okay, that interests me. Let's see how that works, okay? So to begin, in the spring of 2016, there we go. In the spring of 2016, Garden Spot Village unveiled a 4,600 square foot aeroponic greenhouse. The idea came about through our residents, just like you, who had this idea of creating sustainable lettuce all year round, meaning that they wanted fresh produce. We all live in this sort of Tri-County, Berks County, Lancaster County area where we have fresh produce, for the most part, anywhere we want to get them right now, right? You'd agree. I mean, in our area in Lancaster County, there's a stone's throw greenhouse anywhere you'd want to right now. But what happens in November, December, January, February? Nothing, right? It's all shipped in from somewhere, correct? So our residents said to Steve Lindsay, our CEO, said, we want some fresh lettuce. We want to be able to make sure that we have fresh lettuce all year round. And so he did his research and found a local Amishman that created what is now our greenhouse, which was just roughly about 5 years in the making. It came from a request, and This provided a unique opportunity for Garden Spot Village residents to not only enjoy fresh produce year-round, but to also have a part in the process of volunteering in our greenhouse. This greenhouse also allows our chefs year-round access to fresh herbs and organic produce as well. We literally provide farm-to-table produce all year round. And this is one of our harvest tables here in the main dining room area, where, as you can see, we have a beautiful salad bar, 4 different varieties of areas that get food, and of course, our residents who enjoy the lettuce while they're eating. So, and this is, of course, some fresh lettuce from our salad bar. We have a pizza station, and you can see some of our lettuce gets used even for just making food look beautiful. Okay, so let me give you a tour of our greenhouse. Now, when you first walk into our greenhouse, you'll notice that it is totally covered. We have a front half, which is what you're looking at right now, the front section of our greenhouse, which is where when everybody that gets a tour gets started, and we have them sort of gather right there by that first tower that you're looking at there in the beginning there. Now, these are 12-foot tall towers, okay, with a base in the bottom, where you kind of see there's sort of a cap and there's like a brown base there. There's roughly about 30 gallons of water or material that we keep in that base, and what happens is there is a pump in the very middle of that tower, which then takes the water up to the very top of each column, and it cascades down through each hollow column. Okay, and that's basically aeroponics. There's 2 different types of gardening. Okay, there's actually, in the ponics world, there is aeroponics, hydroponics, and aquaponics. Okay, aquaponics. Can anybody guess what that's dealing with? Water and fish. Okay, you can look up aquaponics. Fish is often sometimes their waste actually feeds the plant. The plant actually feeds the fish, and so you have this great cycle that happens there as well. Hydroponics is horizontal. You can look that up. That's usually plants that are grown in a sort of tube. That once again, the plants are not growing in dirt, but are in a net, and that liquid is constantly keeping those plants growing. That's hydroponics. Aeroponics, which is what we have, as you can see, is actually a vertical tower where the material is dropped in from the top of the column and is then fed down through each plant, feeding them on a consistent basis. Okay? So that's the difference between the 3. All right? Now, this is the walking in, and what I'm doing with you right now is I'm actually what I thought about doing here is I thought I would kind of walk you through our greenhouse as though you were kind of walking through. So what you're seeing right now in the very front of this slide here was of course the front of the house when you first walk in. If you walk through those doors just to, pointer. If you walk through these doors right here, okay, this is your next image right there, okay? You see our alleyway, and you see, oops, sorry about that, I'm getting clicky happy there. All right, you see all these beautiful greens. We have 24 of these columns, 24 towers, all right? And of course, this is where I stop everybody and tell them that, of course, every plant begins with what? A seed, right? And so our seeds come what we call pelleted, which means that those little round seeds, which I have with me today, if you'd like to see them as well, are right here. And each seed, each little round seed is 1 lettuce head, was 1 lettuce head, okay? And they are actually made from Johnny's Seed Company in those little round pellets so that we can actually handle them better. If you've ever seen a lettuce seed, they're very, very, very small. Where these pelleted seeds are actually just little tiny pebbles where you can actually pick them up and place them into our seeding bed, which is rock wool. Rock wool is our growing medium. Kind of like dirt is your outside growing medium, okay? or the area that your plant grows in. For aeroponics and hydroponics, we use a product called rock wool. And that rock wool looks like something like this, okay? And the rock wool, and after the presentation here, you may certainly come up and feel this. It actually feels like insulation, okay? It has that sort of scratchy surface, okay, material. And what that does is it does two things, which is really important for us, is that one, it is a perfect growing medium for our seeds because you can just simply drop them in those little holes. Two, it holds the moisture. Okay, we actually make this rock wool nice and moist with the nutrients, and that rock wool actually retains that water, about 80% of that moisture rate. So it keeps that seed and the plants all really nice and moist for you, okay? And the other thing that it does is that once the plants continue to germinate, okay, just like that, all right, is that eventually they grow till about that third leaf stage, and then at the very bottom of that rock wool is where the root systems starts protruding through, okay, and that's what we're looking for, okay? Now that whole process from seed to germination takes about a week and a half in our little nursery, as we call it, okay? Now, once the seeds are done germinating, we then go ahead and put them into our columns. And the columns that you'll see all have those little square discs in the columns there, and that was actually custom made, and those fit perfectly with each plant, okay? And as they're planted, they stay in there for roughly 4 to 6 weeks, okay? And as you can see, this is where this was when it doesn't look this clean now. In fact, this was probably when they were first installed, but there are still 24 column, 24 towers, 8 columns on each tower, and there are 92 slots for each plant in each tower. So that math, if you did it in real quick form, would be roughly about 250,000 plants that we can put in our greenhouse, our little 4,600 square foot property, okay? Now, what's the plant look like afterwards? Well, this is our typical butterhead, okay? And that is, once again, that is a 4 to 6 week time period where that lettuce has grown, okay? What does a root system inside that look like? Well, that is not somebody's hair, or it wasn't not mine, let's put it this way. That is actually a typical root system that is found inside the columns. Now that is actually from a tomato plant. That is how much root development was formed inside those columns. Now you might say, well, why did it get so big like that? Well, because one, it was allowed to. Two, we're feeding the nutrients 24/7. Now, will you find something like that outside? No. I can tell you right now, the boxwoods that we're pulling out of the ground for you folks today, those root systems are very shallow, because what do root systems typically have to pull through or work through when we're planting them outside? Rocks, dirt, sand, and clay, if you want to go that far, okay? So the whole entire time, your plant and your root systems are doing what? They're trying to fight, they're trying to grow. It's taking so long, that's why it takes so long. It's why we plant stuff in the spring and harvest it what? Until now, because it takes that long for that plant to fully develop its root system, to create the leaves, and then create that fruit. Because inside those empty columns, we are feeding that plant 24/7, giving it all the air it needs, all the room it needs. That root system is then allowed to develop and create what you're seeing in front of you today, okay? Once again, that's another lettuce variety. We grow typically about 5 to 6 different types of lettuce varieties in our greenhouse. You might say, well, why are there so many? Well, if you've seen to your salad bar or been to another salad bar, is there only one type of lettuce? No. We all have different types of lettuce varieties that we like. We like it either to crunch or not to crunch. We either like it red or we like it green, or we like it curly or we like it plain. So our salads are very complex, so which is why we grow 5 different types of lettuce varieties for both the salad bar and our chefs to use. Because once again, what do we eat with first? Our eyes, right? If something looks pleasing, if it looks tempting to us, what are we going to do? We're going to eat it. And then the next thing is what? Our smell. I am dying to go home today and just cook a hamburger on the grill. You guys drive me nuts with that Bristo smell that came in here today. That was great. But once again, this is your typical romaine lettuce, which everybody loves on their Caesar salad, okay? Look how beautiful dark and green that lettuce is. And that is a typical oak leaf lettuce. Yeah, that's the other thing too. 5 years ago, when I started at Garden Spot Village, I had no idea there were that many different types of lettuces out there in your salad mix. What? You go to Giant, you go with Redner's, what? You buy a salad mix, right? You dump it in your bowl and you eat it, right? You don't look at each variety. Well, now I do. Now I look at each lettuce variety and go, oh, that must be that type, okay? All right. Another important thing to understand too about this whole entire presentation here is to understand that because it was given to us by our residents, meaning that 5-6 years ago there was a capital campaign. Once they found a builder and a company to build our greenhouse, it was then became resident driven, and also our residents became volunteers in part of the process. Our residents who actually spend time in our greenhouse 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, will come in on those mornings and they will do the seeding part, which you saw with the little tiny seeds, putting them in rock wool. The second part is what you're seeing these two gentlemen doing. They are actually harvesting the lettuce right now, and we put them into bags. And then, of course, the third and final thing is actually you saw is that they actually take those trays of plants that are ready to plant, and we put them into the towers themselves. So without the residents, this greenhouse would not survive, okay? Yes, I am the manager, but it takes more than just me to run this greenhouse. So our residents who take great pride in running this greenhouse really enjoy spending the time and energy with them as well. And that's once again an oak leaf. That is bok choy. Does anybody know what that is?
Rhubarb. Chard.
Chard, very good.
Right.
That is called Swiss chard. And I only do that not to trip you up, but even when I show this in person, people will look at that right away and go, oh, that's just rhubarb.
Yeah.
No, not quite. I know you got the red stems, but if you see there's actually yellow, orange, green, that is actually Swiss chard. And we grow that quite often. So what do you do with it? To tell you the truth, I just grow it. I grow it for our chefs. I have not had it myself, but I'm told that it's very good if you saute it in butter and garlic. Then again, anything you saute in butter and garlic is also very good as well. So I'm told that's the same thing when it comes to bok choy, that if you cut those leaves up and saute that in olive oil and garlic, that it tastes very good. Well, of course it does. All right, so we grow all different types of vegetables. We also grow cucumbers. We grow beautiful tomatoes. Oh, and by the way, that is in March. That picture was taken in March. So that is typically uncharacteristic of anything tomato-wise in this type of area. So I'm just broadening your mind a little bit just to let you know that alternative type gardening can be done all year round, okay? Now, whoops. Now, the reason I show you this is, once again, we're taking you to the back of our greenhouse. If you were to walk through our greenhouse and you saw the alleyway, you kind of does the U shape. You walk back and you see all the greens on either side of you. Then as you come around, I take them to the very back of our greenhouse, which is where all of the mechanics are located, meaning that that's where the water and the nutrients and everything that comes from. I told you in the very beginning that each tower has a 40-gallon nutrient contain unit in the very bottom. that nutrient solution comes from someplace. So the people that actually created and built the greenhouse came up with a really cool suggestion, is that every time it rains, there are rain gutters here, here, and here. And the rain that this greenhouse closes up, of course, and the rainwater actually collects at the very back of the greenhouse, back here, where there are some white pipes. And that rainwater actually collects in these white pipes, and it is then stored in 3 2,500-gallon underground cistern tanks. Okay? That water is then pumped into this big black tank in the back right-hand corner of our greenhouse. And in this tank is where the rainwater is pumped into as needed, along with nutrients that you're seeing being used by this system here, that there are sensors, okay, little electronic sensors that are in this tank that measure how much nutrient solution, pH level, and how much water is in this tank here. This little box car that says right there actually brings that nutrient solution and mixes it all into this black tank here. And then it gets pumped out from this pump right here through these gray pipes that, if you were to use your imagination, at the top of our greenhouse, there are gray pipes that feed each and one of those single towers that we have, that I showed you in the very beginning. And then that also, as it's going through its nutrient cycle, which kind of sounds like if it was raining outside right now, that's the sound that you would hear of the towers getting fed. You hear a sort of a clicking noise, and you hear this kind of, I can't make the noise, I'm sorry. But you can hear it where the water just feeds each one of those columns, and it's feeding that root system. And it does that for about 10 minutes. And then it's off for 30 minutes, and then it goes 10 minutes again. And that does that for 24/7, 365 days. For every plant, for everything that we do. So in other words, it seeds, it plants, it harvests. We do it again. Plant, seed, harvest. Plant, seed, harvest, all throughout the entire year. Are there times where the plant grows a little slower than most? Yes. Okay, we're going into our fall and winter months, which means what? It's less daylight, okay, which of course we rely on. But we do have alternative methods of lighting as well, which we do have some LED lights that you can see right above you here, okay? There are some LED lights that we installed so that during this time of the year, okay, our lights can get some additional light. Plants need, if you want to know, they need at least 8 to 10 to 12 hours of sunlight every day for them to be successful. And of course, we know we're going into that time of the year where we're not getting 8 to 10, 20 hours. We're lucky if we get 6 by the time wintertime comes, right? Boo. But in time, this is why we have these lights in here to help these plants grow. So we've just left the back left-hand corner of the greenhouse. Now we're looking down. As you can see, we're looking down the left-hand side of our greenhouse, looking towards the front again, where you can see there's more towers and more columns and more lettuce that we know what to shake a stick at. Our greenhouse supplies 85 to 95% of the lettuce for our kitchens. Our kitchens at Garden Spot Village, we actually have 2 of them. We have the main kitchen that feeds our harvest table, which you saw in the very beginning of that slideshow, which is where all the food and everybody that comes in, you know, the public, the residents, the staff, they all come into that kitchen area. And that is where most of the lettuce gets used, as you said, in the salad bar and the sandwiches. The other part is we call our East Kitchen, which is more of our skilled nursing care area. That's more defined menus, so we ship them some more lettuce as well. So roughly, when we're thinking about this, we have about 5 pounds of lettuce, 6 different varieties, so roughly about 30 pounds of lettuce for each harvest. So then when you think about that, that's a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday deal. So that's roughly about 90 pounds on the light side, I'm telling you, 90 pounds of lettuce a week that we deliver to our kitchen staff and for our residents of about 1,000 residents in Garden Spot Village that utilize our produce. And you say, it's just lettuce. Yes. But it's also more than just lettuce. It is a place for folks to come and just be able to work in an environment such as this. Okay, anybody know what that is? Those are microgreens. Those are microgreens, and microgreens are really easy and something simple just to explain. Now, what you're seeing in front of you is it's the same type of system where you have this empty PVC column, and there is a tray that has been installed, all right? And what we do is we use these little white foam mats and seeds that we put on top of those foam mats. And we hydrate those foam mats, we cover the seeds for a period of time until it germinates. We take the cover off, and then we let that microgreen grow to roughly about 2 to 3 inches in height. And then our chefs, which once again will use them, and they'll use them like not this whole entire tray in one sitting, but they'll take like an individual baby radish plant or a baby little basil plant, okay? And they'll utilize that to make a dish look, more pleasing or add more flavor. Like for example, this is basil right here, and this is radish, rainbow radish. Once again, adding just, something to make a dish look fancier or make it look more eye-appealing. You know what I mean? And that's what we all enjoy, right? There's a close-up of a microgreen right there. And you would actually, and when you do come, and hopefully when you'll come, I'll have some of these guys ready for you, is that when you actually taste a single microgreen, like radish is my favorite, because sometimes when you put that little bit of radish in your mouth and you close your eyes, you swear you just ate a big, huge honking radish. It is that powerful, and in just a little tiny plant. And that's what's so amazing and great about these microgreens. When I learned about microgreens, when I was first learning about this whole process, I looked up microgreens, and believe it or not, in the fancier towns or fancier chefs, you could sell this little flat right here for roughly $25 at some of those fancier restaurants that are out there that really like using microgreens a lot. And I thought, I got myself a side hustle maybe. But you could really, some of the really top chefs really like using, if you've ever watched like Food Network, sometimes they'll use microgreens on their food and stuff like that to make it look really nice. That's actually called rainbow radish right there, okay? And of course, now my other favorite part of the greenhouse is my herb section. This gets used quite a lot for our residents and both our chefs as well, because nothing speaks higher or gets your senses going when you have a fresh herb. And this is once again part of the tour where I get our residents and people that I give the tour to a little bit of something to, I can tell you what that is, but to anybody without, I wish I had something with you so that you can't call it smell-o-vision, but do you know what that is? Rosemary. Rosemary, very good. And then I would pass it around and go, oh, yes, that's rosemary. What about that? Mint? Correct. Yep. Grass? No. Not quite. It is chives, but it's also not your regular chives. It's actually garlic chives. And one of the way you can tell is that garlic chives actually have a flatter leaf, which you can see here. Regular chives themselves is more round, and you can roll it around in your finger, okay? And you would also be able to tell when you go there, and you'd be able to trim some of that off. You trim some of that garlic chive off, you would smell that little garlic flavor as well, which was great during COVID. Because what was one of the things that told us right away during COVID, what we'd lose first? Our sense of smell. I want to tell you a story. I was scared because every time I was trimming these, whether it be onions, whether it be basil, whatever it was, and there was a time when I was trimming, which is what we do with our herbs, we actually trim them and let them grow, versus the lettuce, which we pull and harvest, okay? These, you cut them, you immediately get the smell of a chive, or you get the smell of a garlic chive, or my favorite, basil. Oh, you trim basil and you're like trimming it, oh, back in Italy. Okay, for a moment, I lost my smell. And I thought, oh, dang, I don't have COVID, do I? And I wasn't feeling sick, I was just not smelling it. And I'm like, I started sweating. I'm like, this is not good. Luckily, it came back. Everything was all good. But it's just part of the enjoyment that I have when I do herbs a lot, is that, anybody know what that one is? It's another Italian herb. Oregano. Very good, yes. Oregano. And that one. That's my basil. That's right. You can put a little mozzarella and balsamic vinegar and basil on there. Yep. All right. Now, the other thing about that I've learned through Aeroponic Greenhouse, in our greenhouse in general, is that we can actually grow edible flowers. Edible flowers, once again, it creates a different type of look for the dish that our chefs are making. And you might say, well, do your chefs request a lot of different stuff? Yes and no. They do request some things like, things to make dishes look more eye-appealing. But for the most part, because we are giving them things that they wouldn't normally buy, okay, or that it would cost for them too much to order, we get them edible flowers. And they're like, oh, that is fantastic. Those are violas. Anybody? Nasturtium, that's right, yeah. I have not tried that. It's not, to me, it's not the most, maybe people like the smell of it. I'm not a fan of it, but I've heard that it's very good to eat. Anybody? Pink, that's right. Dianthus. Pink dianthus, yep, those are very good too. And I've just really enjoyed growing them because, once again, it makes, as my wife says, it makes my greenhouse look less green. Because, you're growing everything lettuce that's green, why not add some color? So we do, and we add some flowers and whatnot to our greenhouse as well. Now, one of the cool things about our greenhouse, and I've given you sort of a real quick but small snapshot of what our greenhouse looks like. We can have special events in our greenhouse. When they made our greenhouse, and maybe I can sort of back this up a little bit for you guys to kind of see what I'm talking about here, is that the middle two columns of our greenhouse actually have wheels on them. And once again, they had a forward-thinking. There it is. Okay. So when you see at the very bottom, the ones on the left are sort of more flat to the ground, and the ones on the right are a little bit up above ground there. Okay. That's because there's wheels on them. Okay. And what we can do on special events is that we can take these towers here and the ones on the other side, and we can shove them together to make open about a 5-foot space so that we can have special events. One of our first special events that I had the privilege of being able to during COVID was that because, just like you, our residents couldn't go anywhere, or were suggested that they could go anywhere, was that we had what we called a seafood boil. We had where we opened up this entire alleyway and we set tables up, and we had our chefs come down, and they made some very beautiful dishes, and our residents, sat like 5 feet apart, okay? But it was so enjoyable for them to utilize the greenhouse without going across the street or really out in public. So you can see this is how we set them up. we had these tables here. This was actually an employee luncheon that was done during COVID, okay, where we had we do a 5-year sort of anniversary for how many years you're, working with, Garden Spot Village, and we do, Frederick Living now as well, where we bring them in, and of course, we had these tables set up, and of course, what a nice environment, just to really sit there and enjoy not being outside, but sort of you were, okay, but you were inside a sheltered building of a greenhouse, okay, and it was a controlled environment, and it was enjoyed by all, because once again, it was away from the building. It was sometime we could just enjoy ourselves. And so we've had many events in that greenhouse as well now, where we've had baby showers, okay? We've had wedding showers, we've had birthday parties. The front of the house is a very common space for even our chefs to have luncheons, okay, for people to come up to. Now, what you're seeing in front of you is that also our greenhouse is also climate controlled, which is why and how we can grow lettuce all year round, okay? One of the first things we want to point out to you is that, of course, as you know tonight, it's going to get a balmy 30 degrees out, okay? So one of the first things that's going to come into play is this unit right here, which is an underground heating unit. That underground heating unit on our floor is actually a heated floor. It's a radiant heat that allows the greenhouse to, once it's enclosed, stay to a nice 65, 70 degrees. Tell me I don't have the best job in January when it's 20 degrees out and I tell my boss, guess what, I got some greenhouse work to do. I'm gonna hang out in the greenhouse all day, okay? Because it's so much warmer in that greenhouse because, once again, we're growing lettuce, and lettuce likes that nice sort of 65, 70 degree mark, okay? The other thing that's on here as well is everything above here is climate controlled, meaning that this computer unit right here, okay, measures, there's a pole that goes up here, and on the outside of the greenhouse, there's a barometer and a thermometer and a wind direction. And it measures all of that and brings that information to here. So that way, if it's too windy, guess what? It closes down the wind, it closes down the sides, and, or of course, closes up the greenhouse. If it's too hot, guess what? It opens everything up. It opens up the roof, it opens up the side, it brings the shade cloth across. All of that to say that is computer controlled, and for the most part, I don't have to worry about it. In other words, if I'm out in the field mowing the lawn or something like that on campus, and all of a sudden there's a thunderstorm coming across, I don't have to worry about running back to the greenhouse to close everything up. It automatically knows because the barometer sees that drop in pressure and it starts closing it up automatically. And then guess what? After the storm, guess what? It opens it back up and I don't have to worry about a thing. All right? The other thing too is in the front here, this is where the cycle timer is located. This is where each side of the greenhouse is determined, like, okay, it's going to run for 10 minutes and then off for 30. This little timer is what controls that as well. Okay. Let's see. Mentioned that. The reason I brought in, okay, and of course, this is the outside of this is basically outside of our greenhouse. We are surrounded by farmers' fields. And one of the things I wanted to bring this up too is because the greenhouse itself, as I mentioned, can grow over 250,000 plants. You say, oh, that's great. But this is what I tell our middle school. We partner with one of our local high schools on a regular basis at Garden Spot High School. And we get students that come in there all the time, and we go over about our greenhouse, and we tell them, exactly, why it's so important to have alternative method of growing vegetables. Because what I show them and explain to them, and I've done my research and said that what we can grow, 250,000 plants, when you think about it, that's a lot of lettuce, or just a lot of vegetables in general. With that in general, what would that look like if we planted all of those plants outside, okay? And that's where that slide comes in, because we tell them that what we are able to grow inside a 3/4 acre plot would take roughly 3 to 4 acres of plot land outside, okay? So if we were to grow everything that we're growing inside that greenhouse outside, this is roughly that area that you're looking for, okay? Now, if you're up on the times, or if you've been a gardener or a farmer or anything of that nature, you know that this is becoming rare, yes? Open fields, open farmlands, all of this is starting to become a little bit less. And I'm not being dramatic, I am just saying that there are farmers that nowadays don't farm this anymore or can't afford to, right? Because either A, their sons and daughters aren't taking up the trade anymore, or 2, it's costing too much, or 3, the environment and the conditions and all of that are just not worth it, right? So it's much more better to have maybe selling the land to developments, okay? So now, where's our lettuce coming from? We're going to still feed ourselves, right? Okay? So where's that all coming from? We have to figure out a way to teach our youth that alternative method of gardening or growing vegetables is an option, okay? So that's what we're doing here today. We are actually, once in a while, I get a homeschool class. This is actually a Christian Catholic school they come once a year with their 9th graders, and we teach them all about aeroponic greenhouse. The other part that's really neat is that because I said roughly about 90% of our lettuce gets used in our kitchens, the rest of it we can actually use, and we actually have a customer in New Holland. This is a lunch place. If you've ever been to New Holland, it's called Lickety Splits. They are a mom and pop, great sandwich place. They will buy from us roughly about 10 pounds of lettuce each week from us. Okay, so the greenhouses are making a little bit, nothing, earth-shattering, but just enough to, to say that, hey, our lettuce is also being used in a local restaurant, and it also gets used once a week. We donate. We have a food bank in New Holland called CrossNet Ministries, which is a nonprofit organization that once a week they have people that need help with food, and so they stop in once a week at kind of like a grocery store, and they'll come in and get what they need, and we roughly give them about 30 pounds of lettuce each week as well from Garden Spot Village as well. And that's one of their famous lettuce wraps there at Lickety Splits. Okay, now we're continuing to take pride, of course, in the process of sharing life through interactions with our local school and students. I mentioned all of that. Yeah, so just to sort of wrap things up here, the biggest benefit that I have found in working with Garden Spot Village and the greenhouse has been the interaction with the residents that I've had. Over the past 5 years, I've developed many, many different types of relationships, and both sharing, both about gardening, about personal life, all of that, just because we're growing lettuce. So for me, it's more than just about growing lettuce inside of a greenhouse. It's developing relationships and getting to know more people like your folks, and and just having a ball. Does anybody have any questions about our greenhouse? Yes?
The roots of the vegetables that you are no longer need.
Yes.
Do you compost them? Are they edible? Can you give them to some animals to eat?
Well, it's a good question. Do the root systems that we develop from both the vegetables of the lettuce or whatever that we're growing, do we compost them? Yes, first of all, we do compost them. We have a big, huge compost pile at Garden Spot Village, of course, because we're constantly doing the same thing at Garden Spot Village that we're doing here, constantly ripping out bushes and trees and stuff like that that are no longer available, so they go into a big, huge mulch pile. And the same thing with those root systems, they do that as well. The root systems, they too can be used. They're great for using for chicken feed. I have chickens at home that, for the lettuce that gets expired, I take some lettuce home as well. So yes, they do get composted and they can be used as well. Anything else?
You
Yeah.
mentioned you were growing vegetables, but you only showed cucumbers. What else do you grow?
So we mentioned that we grow out of vegetables. So let's see, over the past 5 years, what have I grown? I have grown tomatoes, cucumbers, Brussels sprouts, peppers, cabbage, broccoli, beets. Beets, yes. One of the things that with aeroponics, typically you cannot grow anything that's underground, like carrots or potatoes. This type of growing system would not work for that, okay? But we've tried beets, and beets did work, but you know how beets usually have that sort of dome-like look, okay? Well, the beets that we grew actually took the shape of the square, so I had square, so I actually had square beets that it was the beet. So I'm like, okay, but that's the shape it took. So yeah, that was the other thing we tried. Yeah, yep. Yes.
A tomato plant.
Yes.
How much will a tomato plant produce, or how long will it last?
It lasts quite a while, and it does take a while for those tomato plants to grow. One of the things that we have to do with tomato plants, as you know, they grow very long and very viney. We actually grow them in towers, unlike the ones that you saw that are 12 feet tall. Okay. Okay, and so tomato plants actually get grown in the very back of the greenhouse where there's, I call them half-track towers, where they're half the size of the 12-foot towers that we have, and we actually tie cables attached to them, so that as the tomato is growing, we attach them to these cables. Tomatoes usually take about, from the time they start to plant, probably like 2 to 3 months. So it does take a little bit, not as quick as lettuce. Lettuce grows very quickly. 4 to 6 weeks, boom, I'm harvesting lettuce every 4 to 6 weeks. Tomatoes, that takes a little bit long in the process because one, they're nutrient hogs. They constantly are being fed with, constantly filling, the nutrient base that we're using them. And two, they like the temperature a bit warmer than most. And so most times during the winter months, we might start a tomato seed and plant, let's say in January and February. And then usually by March and April is when we'll actually start seeing the tomatoes start to form. And the question would also come, people ask, do you have to pollinate those tomatoes? Typically, by just trimming of that tomato plant itself creates enough pollination necessary for those leaves to create that tomato plant. So, yeah, it does take a while, and once we grow them, it grows a lot of them. We can grow at least, a good bushel of tomatoes from one plant, but we grow quite a few. Yes?
Could you be a profitable venture if you were commercial instead of a nonprofit? Could this operation be profitable?
Could this operation be profitable? The question is a great question. It's one that I've had many thoughts about because, as you can see, this is a summertime photograph of our greenhouse, and as I mentioned before with the environment, that it actually opens up the sides of the greenhouse and opens the roof of that greenhouse. So when that happens, guess what also comes in? Bugs, yeah. So this is still farming, folks. This is not, a solution to, non-farming, okay? This is still farming, as the gentleman that built this greenhouse once told me, is that, you're still gonna have issues with the same kind of problems that you might have out in the garden with those white flies or with the caterpillars or disease issues like powdery mildew. All of that to say that if this would become a commercial type endeavor where we were just trying to just grow lettuce for, let's say, Whole Foods or a grocery store, my answer to that would be this would not be the ideal building, let's just say, to house that, because I don't have control of when that window opens and closes to allow that insect and disease problem coming through. If this was a commercial type of growing environment, I would be in a totally enclosed type of structure, kind of one that maybe would be an empty tractor trailer truck, or maybe an empty building that has all four sides, that the lighting that I would control the climate, whether it be cool or hot, the lighting I could control, all of that to say that if I was producing on a commercial basis, it would not be a greenhouse. It's great for the sense of what we're using it for, but yeah, it's a great question.
Can you control the production by varying the amount of light or the temperature or water or anything?
In this type of situation, would I be able to control how much we grow based on that? Well, there's only so much that I can control. Like, for example, like right now during the season, it's getting colder out, okay? And we're losing less light, okay? So the two things that I can control in this greenhouse in this type of environment is, one, the temperature, because I have both a thermostat in the water solution that creates a nice 70-degree constant temperature of that water so that the plants are always getting that 70-degree mark, okay? Two, the environment itself, meaning that the greenhouse itself will keep the pests out, okay? The only other thing that I am missing is the light. And that's the only thing that we have. Some LED lights, growing lights up top that are cascading over the plants, but it's not the most ideal situation. You know what I mean? It was built, and then when they tried building the columns, they tried developing some lighting inside those towers to help that solution. But the towers and the columns themselves have four sides to them. So you have to manually turn those columns like every other week to make sure that it gets equal sides, okay? So we do the best that we can to make it, more, as much more as we can, yeah.
Would a commercial operation have lighting 24 hours a day?
Not 24 hours a day, no, but you could have it on a timer because plants only need a certain amount of daylight per day.
And
So
you give them more light than that, then what happens?
Plants actually do need a period of darkness, because that's actually when they grow. So adding more light wouldn't necessarily mean more production. You know what I mean? It would just mean that the plants themselves would grow maybe faster, but it wouldn't say it would grow more. Yes? Yes?
I forgot my question. Where do you get, who produces the pellets, and do you stagger your planting?
The plants, the seeds themselves, come from a company in Maine called Johnny's Seeds.
From Maine.
From Maine. That is who we've been dealing with since I've started. And yes, we do stagger. And that is the one thing that I started when I started growing in here, because we're not going to grow all 250,000 plants and then send 150 plants to the kitchen, because guess what? They're not going to use it all. So what we do, so that every week there's something for our residents to do. So that's why we stagger. That's why we seed, plant, harvest, seed, plant, harvest. And we roughly do we'll plant about 2 to 3 different types of blends each week. And so then, as you can see there's different, let me see if I can go to the beginning again. Whoops, there there. You can just see it from there. Even from there, you can see that there's different growth levels, okay? Like here, you can see that these guys have just gotten started, okay? Versus here, this is probably midway. You know, they've had like 2 or 3 weeks in the towers. And this here, it's probably hard to tell, but this is actually a lot fuller. So you can kind of even tell by this slide here that there's different phases of growth that we have in our greenhouse.
And what was the initial cost?
The initial cost of the whole project itself,
Yeah.
it was roughly about $300,000. And most of it came from capital campaign, which means that most of it was paid for by our residents 6 years, almost 10 years ago now, that they wanted this built. Yes?
How many residents are involved?
How many residents are involved? We roughly have about 3 residents per day, different residents per day. So roughly about 9 to 10 residents in total that volunteer, and they're the same ones that volunteer each week. It is one of those waiting list type of volunteer areas where if somebody is on vacation or longer visit list, then the next person up gets to come in to the greenhouse as well.
How do you harvest the top? Who goes to the top?
That's why they hired me. Yeah. No, we have some huge ladders that actually step ladders, and yeah, that's the other thing. These guys are actually 12 foot tall, and so we actually have some ladders that what I'll do is during a harvest, if I see there's like a bunch of big tall lettuces, I'll get up there and pull them out and set them on top of the ladder for our residents to use. Because if I don't, guess what? It doesn't get harvested, and it goes to seed, and then it doesn't look right, and then we throw it away. So yes,
That medium that you grow the seeds in?
Yes.
Is that reusable or it's done when the?
it is done. It is actually man-made. It is not organic. It is actually man-made rock wool that was formed from molten rock and formed into these little trays here, and I'll have it up here for you to feel and look at. It's quite amazing, but it is actually the best type of growing medium in the aeroponics type of. There are different types of growing medium. There's coconut hair, there's rock wool, and there's different types that I can't often remember, but this was what worked for us here. Yep.
Is that domestically produced?
Does it what?
Is it domestically produced or is it imported?
Good question. I don't know, but that's a great question.
Is it reusable, or do you have to throw it away after we?
Yes, same question she asked. It is not reusable. Once we use it and it's planted and it's been hydrated and sat in the seed table and not used, yep, it no longer can be used. And we've tried also, like some people have tried taking the plant itself and planting it in the garden with the rock wool. It doesn't produce real well, okay? Because once again, you're changing the environment from that plant to getting all of its nutrients from the rock wool to now you're trying to tell that plant, now you need to go defend yourself in the dirt. And guess what? That plant doesn't like it. Okay? Well, great. Thank you so much, very much. Thank you so much for being such a great host. I appreciate it. Hope to see you in our greenhouse.
Yes, we're so grateful for Steve for coming down from Garden Spot Village. We are hoping, I was talking to Steve about taking a bus trip out there to see the greenhouse at some point in the spring. So we'll certainly advertise and be in conversation about that. But I hope you enjoyed it. Steve will be here for a little bit if you have any additional questions. And thanks for coming out today.